Welcome to Rhythm of Access, the podcast exploring the intersection of disability, creativity, and art. We bring you candid conversations with disabled artists who are redefining the cultural landscape through their practice, advocacy, and vision. This episode is brought to you by Blurring the Boundaries Arts and the Canadian Accessible Musical Instruments Network, with support from the SSHRC grant, also known as Social Sciences and Human Research Council of Canada. Today's guest is Jason Dasent, a visually impaired music producer, audio engineer, and accessibility consultant originally from Trinidad and now based in the UK. For over 25 years, Jay has worked across multiple facets of the music industry, from advertising and music production to film scoring and education. But Jay's contributions don't stop at the mixing decks. As a fierce advocate for accessibility in the ever-evolving world of music technology, Jay has spent the last 6 years working closely with music equipment manufacturers to ensure that their hardware and software are accessible to all. His advocacy has directly shaped the development of new accessible tools and interfaces now on the market. Without further ado, I welcome to you, Jay. Jay,
Hi,
so good
Gift.
to see you, man. It's been a long time.
Same here. It's great to be in touch again, and thanks so much for inviting me to be on this amazing podcast.
No, thank you for making the time. I know you're a very busy guy, so I feel very honored that you're here.
It's great to be here.
So, Jay, before we get started, I'd like to play a little game with my guests before we get started, if that's okay. It's an icebreaker. It's an
Okay,
icebreaker question so that people can get to know you up close and personal, if that's all right.
sounds good to me.
All right. So, if you could describe your sound or production style as a landscape, what would it look and feel like?
Okay, that's a great question, and I guess what an icebreaker. Let me think about this. I've never been asked anything like this before. But
Mm-hmm.
basically, okay, so as you said in the introduction, I'm from Trinidad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Trinidad is an island in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
It's very warm in terms of the weather. It's the average is like maybe between 29 and 33 degrees right through the year. And so in my music and production, I try to bring that warmth into whatever I do. Um, besides that, I love people. I love being around people. I love interacting with people, and I like to think of myself as, a friendly person, a warm person. So again, I try to interject that warmth into my music production, into everything I do, into my dealings with people on a daily basis. So, I just like everything around me, and especially my song, to be very, welcoming and embracing. And yeah,
Mm.
that's how I kind of would describe what I do, and, what I would like people to take away when they listen to my music.
Yeah, yeah. A warm, embracing production. I love that. I really
Yeah.
love that. Thank you, Jay. So, Jay, let's rewind to your early days in Trinidad. Like, how did your relationship with music begin, and like what led you into production and engineering? Like, you are not just a musician, but you also became a engineer and producer. So, how did that journey start about, like starting back in Trinidad?
Okay, well, one of the first things I can remember about me as a person is music, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
of course, like being 3 years old and stuff, right? I had no clue that I was going to do music, right? But I just
Yeah,
knew that when I heard melodies and harmonies and chords and everything, that something just felt right.
yeah.
So I remember like just sitting down on a rocking chair at home, and
Mm-hmm.
like music would be playing. I remember it was things like carpenters and stuff, and I'll tell you why I kind of refer to like carpenters
Mm,
music and everything. But I just remember that music playing, and it just felt right. It brought
mm,
out, even at 3 years old, it would bring out all different types of emotions. I would feel happy, maybe I'll feel sad sometimes, sometimes even I would
Mm-hmm.
hear something and I would even feel a little bit scary, like just so many different emotions that melody and chords kind of brought, to me. And
Mm-hmm.
reason yeah, I'll say now, reason that's important because I do things in my productions like vocal arrangements and stuff. I realize it might have been something that I heard when I was like 3 years old, technique and it was building in me since then, since I was really young. Fast forward to when I was about 9 or 10 years old, being in primary school, and um, a friend of mine had one of these little Casio keyboards, and
Mm-hmm.
I would pick it up from time to time, and I would press some keys, and it
Yeah.
it sounded like music instead of noise, right? So who knows? Mary had a little twinkle twinkle little star, right? But
Yeah.
somehow this thing sounded musical,
Yeah.
and around that time, it felt like, okay, yeah, I'd kind of maybe like to kind of explore this a little bit more.
Yeah.
So I picked up my friend's keyboard close to Christmas time. So guess what I wanted for Christmas from my family, right?
A new keyboard.
A new keyboard, and which, my family was, kind enough to get for me. We had a holiday to Margarita in Venezuela, and one of
So,
the
question: was it a Casio as well, or was it
It
something
was a
else?
Casio, but
Okay.
but what was cool, it was a slightly higher end Casio than the one I played with in
Okay.
school, right?
Okay.
So I got it. We went to Margarita, which is a little town in Venezuela, an island of Venezuela, actually. For
Yeah.
Christmas holidays, my two sisters and myself with my mom and dad, we went to Margarita and they bought me the
Yeah.
keyboard then, and I remember just playing with it even in the hotel room, before we came back to Trinidad and
Yeah.
just really enjoying it. And then, it just one thing just led to another.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward 2 more years, right?
Yeah.
When I decided, yeah, I really like this. So then my family, they got me, I got one of these home organs,
Wow.
and that was pretty cool. It lasted a short time because it was just like, I mean, I, when I say it lasted a short time, I didn't have it for very long. I just had it maybe a year or two.
Yeah.
But at that point, I realized that I wanted more. I wanted more than just an organ with presets and stuff. I wanted the real deal, right? I wanted the real
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So we sold the organ, and I got my first official synthesizer. It was a professional Casio this time. It was a Casio CZ101, which goes
Oh
into the
wow.
realm of professional synthesizer, right? That
Wow.
and along with that, I got a Roland TR-505 drum
Oh
machine, and then swiftly followed up by the Roland Juno one, you know.
goodness.
So then it became MIDI, right? I can make these two, I can make the Casio and Roland talk to each other, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can have a piano from the Casio with a string pad from the Juno while I program drums on the TR-505, right?
Wow.
And then, it came together, and then, I realized that, yeah, I started, and along with learning like to program and everything, I started getting more involved in music, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, went into secondary schools, and then I realized, well, music would impress the girls, right? So even more incentive to keep going, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
started performing, and serenaded a girl or two in my life, wrote a song or
Okay.
two, but
Okay.
it just led one thing led to the other. Fast forward about 3 more years, when I was about 15 or 16,
Yeah.
word started getting out there that I could play a little
Yeah.
bit of music and everything, and then recording studios started approaching me. I
Wow.
actually started doing advertising work around 15 years old, right? And
Wow.
I started getting hired in different studios, to come and do like
So you were like
jingles,
their session
a
musician.
session musician, yeah, session
Wow.
musician. And then artists started getting in contact with me, because I kind of developed by then, because then I was probably like about 6 years into music, and I
Right.
learned
Right.
really
Right.
quickly. I learned, and then yeah, one thing led to the other, and then I started working in more and more studios. Then I started working live, performing with different bands in Trinidad,
Yeah.
traveling to different countries with bands, started working as musical director for bands,
Yeah.
so handling all the programming and everything, and which led
Wow.
to my studio a few years later, my own recording studio in
Okay.
Trinidad. And by then I was pretty established in the industry, so I could probably had lots of work, at that point, and And then what happened? Then let's fast forward to now. Let's bring it into the present. Well,
Mm,
when I say like just before COVID, around that time, right? Maybe about 6 years ago.
yeah.
Again, I know it seems to be in like 6 year tranches kind of thing, right? But I skipped the middle years, right? I skipped the years like
Yeah.
in my 30s and stuff like that because I was just working constantly there and everything. But about 6 years ago, both Sarah, my wife, and myself, we felt, that we kind of outgrew the industry in Trinidad. As I said before, Trinidad is a small island, and we
Right.
and we did everything there is to do in Trinidad. And
Mm,
we both felt for our careers, we kind of still at the beginning somehow, right? And there's so much more to do. So we
mm-hmm,
actually came here to the UK, and I did an MA, right, in
mm-hmm,
at the British and Irish Modern Music Institute, BIM.
okay.
So I did a master's there in popular music practice and that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm,
And yeah, and that's it. And while here, I mean, I guess we save for some of your other questions, but that's the journey so far. But
yeah.
we save the accessibility consultant part and stuff,
Ah,
for like
interesting.
so.
Interesting. So, okay, you're a very versatile guy. You worked in, advertising, you worked in education, film. How do you approach versatility in your creative life?
How do I approach versatility in my creative life? Okay,
Yeah.
quite
Like,
interesting,
how are
yeah.
you able to shift across different disciplines, right? Like within the music industry, like how,
Okay,
yeah,
I think it's based on experience. I haven't done a little bit of everything. I'm an avid learner. I want to learn something new every day. If a day goes by and I don't learn something, I'm bored, right? So I've been like learning right through. So, I would, look at other musicians' work, look at other producers, break down things mentally and analyze
yeah,
different production, see what works in the advertising industry, see what music for corporate is like, live music, different styles of production. So it's all about learning and putting that learning into practice every day, and you just find, what you give to it is what you get out of it. So,
hmm,
for example, a job may come up and it may trigger something that I saw a year ago. Not I'm trying to copy anyone or anything, but I just realized, okay, I learned this technique a year ago. Yes, I can do this. Yeah, I can do this.
yeah,
Yeah. If I don't know, I'll go learn it. If somebody asks me to do something I don't know how to do it, I don't ever
yeah,
really say I don't know. I'll say, okay, yeah, sure, let's do it. And all of this time I know I have to go learn it, right? But my thing is,
yeah,
yeah, sure, no problem, let's do it. So it's about always challenging yourself and never saying you can never sit back and say, okay, I know it all, because you don't. You
yeah,
certainly you never do. And if you say you do, then something is wrong with you, and then you stop learning. You know.
yeah,
So
right,
so I'm able to approach different things, different genres, and even things like people skills, learning to deal with different types of personalities, the positive and negative experiences. It just comes to build you and make you into who you are, but
yeah,
always being willing to, listen to people, take their ideas, even if you don't agree with it, you just try to find the good in their ideas, because everybody's idea is valid, you know.
yeah,
And it's just about, again, it's about loving people, and I know it maybe it might answer might sound a little bit disjointed, but it's what
hmm,
builds it, what makes me who I am, and what makes me able to do what I do every day.
hmm. Interesting. So let's dive into accessibility a bit within music technology.
Sure.
I know you've worked with so many companies within music technology to bring accessible tools to the market. Um, what drives your work at the intersection of innovation and inclusion? So tell me a bit about the collaborations you've had with the companies that you work with right now.
Okay, all right. So I'll tell you what drives that. What
Hmm,
drives that is to never be willing is that I'm never willing to accept the fact that something is not accessible. And I'm gonna take that,
hmm.
right? I'm not
No
gonna
compromise.
no compromise in any way. And I realize that if I have to be a part of making it accessible, that's what I'm gonna do, right? And
Hmm,
then, and at that point, I guess my kind of people skills again come into play, right? So we could chat about things. I mean, I want to touch on, maybe a little bit later on the approach. A lot of people ask me how. I mean, they come out and ask me very bluntly, how do you get companies to listen to you? I send emails to companies and I don't get an answer, right?
mm,
How do you do it, right?
mhm, mhm,
And yeah, maybe I'll just go straight into it. How I do it is by my approach to the companies, right?
mhm.
Now companies call me as opposed to me calling them, right? Which is
Wow.
says a lot, right?
Yeah.
But how I would do it. So I want to talk about things that I don't like and kind of I believe don't work, and I think a lot of people unfortunately go this route. I get often I'm asked to sign petitions and stuff saying will you sign this petition demanding that government passes legislation that things need to be accessible, right?
Mm,
And you
mhm,
know what, GIF? I'm not going to sign it. I refuse to sign that, right?
mm,
Because what that does, in my opinion, of course, it's subjective, but in my opinion, that drives people away, right?
mm.
I'm a type of person, I would do anything for you. I would give you everything I got,
Yeah.
but don't embarrass me or shame me or force me into doing it. Come to
Mhm.
me, Jay. I have an idea. Can we do this together? Yeah, sure. Let's do it. Let's make it happen, right? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and I think what I like for myself is what I would like for others. So
Mm.
if I go to a company, I'm not going to say shame on you. Your product is not accessible. I'll say
Right.
I'll go to the company and say, hey,
I want to help.
I love your new keyboard. I'd love to use it, but it's not accessible right now. Let's have a Zoom chat. Let's make it work. Let's do it together, right?
Huh.
And I'll tell you, GIF, that works 99% of the time for me.
It's a
Has
shift
worked.
in attitude and conversation.
Yeah, and I've made so, and with this approach works for, I mean, my interaction with CEOs of multi-billion-dollar companies. It works with software engineers. It works with marketing people, right? You
Mhm.
know, someone once said to me, they read my emails because I always say in my emails, "Hi, how you? Hope you're cool," right? They say,
Right.
they said they get fed up of seeing, dear Mr. Gift, I hope
Mm,
this email finds you well, I don't
mm.
speak like that. Hey, hope you're cool, what you
Yeah.
did this weekend, right?
Yeah.
And a CEO of a company, multi-billion dollar company again, he said, Jay, when I see that, I read your emails and I respond to
Mm,
your emails. He said, I get enough of dear Mr., right?
mm,
So it's just
mm,
about being cool. My daughter says to me, and I heard her once say that, how I'm such an authentic person, and that was one of the
mm,
best compliments I've ever got. I'm
mhm.
not putting on anything. I'm not trying to impress anyone. I'm just Jay, and
Yeah.
Jay wants to do something cool together. Jay wants to make an accessible world, right? But Jay wants
Yeah.
to do it in a way that integrates everybody. Everybody enjoys it. It's no use if
Yeah.
you're not having fun, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, so that's basically my approach to engaging companies to um, investigate and look into and implement accessibility development. You
Yeah. Yeah.
you were asking about some of the companies I work with, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, so I'll just give you a little list of a few of them, what
Yeah.
I can remember now. Focusrite Innovation, right?
Okay.
Excellent company, very committed to accessibility. I don't know if you all use that phrase in Canada, but we have something in Trinidad. We say you put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah. Yeah. We
You all say
do.
that as well, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
we do.
Okay. Well, that's a company that puts their money where their mouth is. Focusrite. Um,
Wow.
Native Instruments has been doing a lot of cool stuff. Arturia in France. Um,
Okay.
Audio modeling in Italy, right?
Wow.
Soft tube in Sweden, right?
Okay.
And we could probably chat about some of the equipment and
Yeah.
soft tube in Sweden, New Gen Audio. Who else? Yeah, and
You work
SSL.
with the Roland as well, right?
Roland, I'm a Roland artist now. We still
Yeah.
chatting about accessibility development, and I'm hoping that it's going to happen soon.
Yeah.
Their
Yeah.
equipment is not accessible yet, but I am a Roland a signed Roland artist. You know.
Wow.
So, but yeah,
That,
so it's
that's
real cool. I
incredible.
get I get all to use all the new keyboards, and like I have the brand new V stage next to me, which is like, wow, what a keyboard.
Wow. So,
But
so I see in the background of your video, for those who are just listening to the podcast, Jay has about 5 keyboards surrounding him right now.
yeah,
Do you want to tell the people what you got here in the background? What keyboards are
okay.
within
Well,
reach right now?
Well, these are the five you see. They're actually 13.
Oh,
Right?
okay.
It's crazy,
Okay.
right? So,
Wow.
so if you want to talk a little bit about the studio, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. So on my right,
Yeah.
I have the Roland Phantom 8, which is their
Wow.
flagship keyboard, right? Studio, that's their flagship studio keyboard.
Yeah.
Above it, on the same stand, I have the Roland V Stage that just came out a couple months ago, right?
Goodness.
Um, on the left of me, I have the Roland Jupiter X, which is
Goodness.
yeah. Above that, we'll just talk keyboards first, right? There's a shelf in the
Yeah.
middle with some pad controllers and stuff like that. But above that, I have the Arturia Astrolab, right?
Okay.
Above that, I have the Roland Juno DS. Okay.
Goodness.
And then on a shelf in between the Jupiter X and the Astrolab, I have Native Instruments Machine, right?
Okay.
The Machine Plus. Next to that, I have an Ableton Push 2. Yeah.
Okay.
And then, oh yeah, in front of me now, I have the brand new Native Instruments Complete Control S61 Mark III.
Wow.
And then, so that's the keyboards that are set up in the studio, right? I have things like the new Arturia Keylab MK3 and another Native Instruments. So it's just to say, yeah, a few more keyboards around this room, right? I have also a mobile rig. And
It,
then,
it feels like a candy shop.
yeah, kind of actually. And then in front of me now on the desk, I have the soft tube console one channel and console one feeder, right?
Okay.
Both MK3.
Yeah.
I have the Avid S1 control surface.
Yeah.
And above that, I have the on the left hand side, I have three audio interfaces set up here. So on the
Goodness.
left hand side, I have a Focusrite Claret,
Yeah.
right, which I absolutely love. On the right, I have the Focusrite Redline 8, which is really nice. Above that, I have the Vocaster, which is the podcasting interface. And
Ah.
then I have two Scarletts as well, which I use for like live recording. What
Okay.
else? AKG C414 is the main mic in the
Yeah.
studio. Adam Audio A7 Vs are the main studio monitors. You know,
Okay.
I also have the T5Vs and the D3s as well too. So
Yeah.
I have a few things in the studio, a few cool things, and
Very cool. Very cool. Very cool. So,
yeah.
okay, let's talk about the studio as a space of empowerment. I'm
Mhm.
curious to know, both as a producer and accessibility consultant, what do you believe makes a creative space truly inclusive?
Okay, the equipment being accessible, and
Mhm.
I'll give you like examples of each, right?
Mhm.
When the equipment is accessible, it allows you to, and when you're talking accessibility, you're talking quality accessibility, right? It could
Yeah.
meaning when something is right, it must remove your disability for that moment while you're working, right?
Hmm.
So I will always say, so one piece of equipment that really stands out in this, I mean, everybody has done amazing jobs, right? And my studio is pretty much fully accessible, right?
Mhm.
But one piece of equipment, if I'm to describe it using a description of a piece of equipment, it's the soft tube console one system, right?
Hmm.
Um, we have worked, of the engineer worked with, big shout out to Arvid Johnson, right?
Okay.
Um, engineer at SoftTube.
Okay.
He worked with me and, to really build top-notch accessibility into the Console One system, right?
Hmm.
If you wonder what the Console One system is, it's your mixing system, right? So, for example, it's your software desk, base mixing desk, basically. So there are two units. There's this Console One channel, which hosts all your buttons for like EQ and compression and all that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
And then there's a console one feeder, which is holds the actual feeders for the unit,
Hmm.
But together they form the console one mixing system. And what we've done with this is like nothing short of incredible, right?
Hmm.
Um, so, for example, we addressed a lot of things that plague the visually impaired people for years, right?
Hmm.
Um, in particular, one that comes to mind is metering,
Okay.
right? So, as blind people, we learn to use our ears and we can hear if something clipping. I can tell you if something is clipping by listening to it, right? But I
Wow.
lived for years not knowing for 100% sure, right? A sighted person could look at that meter, right?
Mm,
And see if it goes into the red. If it goes red, it's clipping, right?
yeah.
We have to rely, and we learn to do it, and we're usually accurate, but you don't know for sure, right?
Mm.
You don't know for sure. You don't want to find out 3 months later when your stuff is on the radio and you listen to it and 2 minutes into the song you hear the clip, right? And it's
I
like,
feel
oh
like you speak
no,
of
I can't
experience.
believe that passed by, right? So so I went to Harvard, and we spoke about this. How could we address this? Because the console one shows meters are obviously, and sighted people could look at it and see when something is
Yeah.
clipping, right? So I went to Harvard and said, Harvard, what we can do about this, And Arvin is the kind of person he would say, Jay, let me think about it. He's saying, yes, I'm sure we can do it. And
Yeah.
I get an email from him 7 o'clock in the morning, right? Jay, what you doing at 9 o'clock? Let's have a quick Zoom meeting. I have an idea, right?
Hmm.
So what we did, we got voiceover, the screen reader on Mac and the equivalent like JAWS and stuff on PC to read that meter, right? So we got it to read the meter and it will tell you, okay, your peak level is -5 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But if we set in a level for like a microphone or something, we can press a keyboard shortcut and
Yeah.
have it read the meter on demand, right?
Yeah.
But when you set in a level, you want to do more than that, right?
Yeah.
So going on the idea that like what would normally happen if I was setting a recording level, like for a drum kit or a vocal, Sarah would normally, pop by, like she did when we were trying to get this lighting right just now, right?
Yeah.
But she would pop by and I say, Sarah, do me a favor, read this meter for me, and she'd say, okay, oh, it's hitting -5 now. And
Yeah.
then a little while after, I want to see, okay, what happened since she told me it was -5,
Mm.
another few seconds into the song. Did it raise? Did it drop? Right? And I'll ask her to
Right.
read it again. So in telling
Right.
Arvid about this, Arvid said, how about if we make the meter read every few seconds, right? How about if we make it read at intervals, right?
Hmm.
And which was, so then he actually programmed it where now you can say, you can tell it when to read the meter. You can say, okay, you can read it on demand, of course, but
Yeah.
then you say, okay, read it to me every 3 seconds, read it every
Hmm.
5 seconds, right? And so therefore you can set perfect levels, right? Um, and then along with that now, we can say not only the peak meters, let's see what the input meter is. Let's see what it's coming in to the system at, so we able to read the input meters. What about when we're
Right.
doing compression? We can read gain reduction meters to see how much compression is happening at any given time. So when you
Yeah.
put that together with all the feedback from all the knobs and buttons and everything, you're
Yeah.
removing the concept of being blind. I'm not blind when I'm in the studio, right?
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
actually, and then other companies are doing just as amazing things. The Focusrite, the Scarlett interfaces now, right? Um,
Yeah.
you just hit auto gain, you sing or talking to your mic and everything, and in
Yeah.
10 seconds it tells you auto gain successful. It sets the
Wow.
level. So you never have to worry now. And that's something
Hmm.
that has been removed, something that plagued visually impaired people. So that now, going back to answer your question, 5 minutes later, um, um, that's how you stay in a creative workflow. When you
Hmm.
DAW, like Logic or Pro Tools is
Yeah.
accessible and you just move in, your keyboards are accessible, you could tweak your songs, do a bit of song design, and everything. When you
Hmm.
remove the disability, right,
Yeah.
it allows you to stay in a creative flow.
Hmm. That's nice. That's nice. So,
Yeah.
like, you've spoken about a little bit about the barriers you faced in your journey, but I'm curious, like, what other barriers have you faced, either as a performer, and like, how have you worked to overcome or to navigate those barriers? So, like, what have been like moments of frustration, and moments of like resistance, within your journey, within the music, within art?
Okay, baby, growing up in Trinidad, I mean, Trinidad is a beautiful place, lovely people and everything, right?
Hmm.
But, I did encounter, people, small-minded people from time to time,
Hmm.
So some of it is understandable and some is not, right? So, for example, you spoke about that I do film production, right? I do music for film,
Yeah.
right? It
Yeah.
could be a bit embarrassing walking into a meeting with 15 advertising execs, so along with a film director and everything. You walk
Mm,
in totally blind and say, okay, I want this job to score your next film, right?
yeah.
You kind of open yourself to a bit of embarrassment, humiliation, you know?
Mm,
And it's, although it's a bit, I mean, you can understand it. If you try to put yourself in their shoes, you kind of could understand it, right? But
mm,
some people embrace the idea where others just thought it was downright silly, right? You know,
mm.
all that to say, I have won awards for film production and everything already.
Wow.
But just having the opportunity to prove yourself, when you meet somebody who's small-minded, you know,
Yeah.
it's it could be a bit of a put off. I mean, I remember one really sad moment I had when I was kind of like in my teens, right?
Mhm,
I remember going into a studio and the person who was running the session was a really good friend of mine, and and but at that point I was actually a better keyboard player than he was, and we both knew that, right? He was a better engineer than I was, but
mhm,
so I just went to hang out with him in the studio, and at that time, I always liked to be around studios, and even when I
mhm,
wasn't working, and I was there, and he was having problems with a keyboard part, and
mhm,
he said, Jay, you mind just coming and play this for me, and just
mhm,
you mind, let me just play this in for me, having some problems, right? And and the person whose job it was, the client was there, and the client
mhm,
immediately said, with all due respect, I'd rather not, right? And
mm.
and he did that obviously because he thought I was blind, and
Oh
there's
man.
no way I can do this. I can operate the equipment in the studio, and things like that would happen from time
Mm,
to time. So yeah, basically, a lot of it was, and then of course, before equipment was fully accessible, it would be a barrier. There would be some equipment that you just can't use, right?
yeah.
That you want to use, and that would be a bit of a barrier, and is what got me into a little bit of programming and everything, because again, I'm not a person to take no for an answer. There must be a workaround, you know
Mhm,
and so yeah,
mm,
so things like that, but normally the barrier is more people than
more
equipment.
people.
Yeah,
Interesting.
so maybe we can say something like the equipment is not necessarily inaccessible, but people are, people's
Mm,
minds, right? But what you have to do, you have to be open. You need to learn to roll with the punches, right? And
mhm,
analyze it, and don't jump to conclusions, right? I
yeah.
mean, I should think, if I was sighted and a blind person came to me and said they wanted to do a film, I would
Mhm,
think about it, right? I mean, I would like to be open because that's what I like for myself, right? And I
mhm,
would be open now. But somebody who's like totally ignorant about it and never had any experience is okay. It's okay if they react a little bit funny. Don't be offended, right?
mm,
Maybe work with them and say, yeah, yeah, I can do it. Yeah, give me a chance. I can do it, but in a nice way. Just be cool, just be chill about it.
mm,
Don't and being chill. I've made fantastic friends. Through it.
yeah.
With film directors and everything, and I worked through it in a very, again, it's just a manner of, you can do anything, you can say anything. It's how you do it. You
Mm,
know. But yeah, those are some of the barriers I kind of face, from time to time. A lot
mhm,
less now, but yeah, to answer your question, and what happens as and I want to encourage people, who are getting into the business and everything, and who may be facing some barriers now. The more you
yeah.
get into it, and the more you become accepted in everything, you kind
Mhm,
of don't really remember, And I can remember that one story that I gave you just now with the guy in the advertising clients and stuff, right?
yeah.
But I can't go and give you a set of memories now because the good really outweighs the bad, right?
That's true.
And there
That's
comes a time when you kind of don't really even remember much, right? Because I mean, I just work on a
true.
daily basis. I have my clients I talk to every day. They send me briefs to read, and
Yeah.
everything and is no different to working with a sighted person. And that's what you take with you. You don't have time to remember the negative.
I
Yeah,
hear you. I hear you. I hear you.
yeah.
So, with that, what advice would you give to an up and coming artists with a disability looking into getting into the industry and make the change through their work? Like, what sort of advice or wisdom would you impart?
Okay, the first thing I want to tell you is anything is possible. I do everything from recording to mastering, recording to mixing and
Hmm,
mastering, right? So first of all, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Everything is possible, right? Um,
hmm,
Next thing, research,
hmm,
read. You know, a YouTube video is always playing on my phone and my Bose headphones,
hmm,
in my bed, right? In the
yeah,
kitchen. A YouTube video is always playing, looking at a piece of technology, right?
hmm,
Because I want to know okay. I want to know, okay, what's next? What do we next need to make accessible, right?
hmm,
So research, right? Keep learning, right?
hmm,
Keep keep learning. Like now, sometimes I'm sad to see that we have all this equipment accessible now, but a lot of people don't know that it is, right? So
hmm,
if you're interested in building a career in the industry, you got to go out there and find out what's available. How you could obtain this equipment. How you can
hmm,
how you might be able to afford it, or if you're a part of a university or something, if you can get the faculty interested in assisting you. But find a way. You don't need a million things. Audio interface, and of course, hopefully you have a computer because you're going to need a screen reader to
yeah,
interact with the outside world, you know. So an audio interface, a DAW, you don't have to spend a lot of money. Get
yeah,
started, right? Be brave. When I say be brave, go out there and tell people what you want, right?
hmm,
Um, when I say like you can't, a lot of people are shy, they might be a little bit shy, they may know that they have it in them, but they may be scared to approach people. Go ahead and approach people, believe in yourself first, right?
hmm,
Because if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will believe in you, right?
yeah,
And just
yeah,
just go out there and make it happen, reach out, be chill,
sure, yeah,
don't try to force anyone's hand to do anything. No one owes you anything, right? That's
hmm,
something, you're not entitled. You got to work
hmm,
hard just like everybody else, right?
hmm,
No one owes you anything, right? You go out there and make it work,
yeah,
and what you gifted is what you get out of it, right?
hmm,
Again, I'll say it 3 times: be chill, be chill, be chill,
yeah,
right? um
yeah,
as I say, don't force anyone, engage them. Sarah and I, we say, it's inspiration, not obligation. So we want to inspire
hmm,
people. We don't want to make anybody feel obligated to do anything, because we don't like to be made to feel obligated, right?
hmm,
And yeah, in a nutshell, these are the kind of things I would say,
hmm,
to people. Give it all you got. Don't give up. It's not always good. It's not going to be easy. If it's easy, it's no fun, right? If
hmm,
Yeah, if it's easy, you're going to be completely bored. You know,
yeah,
the
yeah,
challenges has made me who I am and continue to shape my personality.
yeah,
And if I had to do it, I'll go and I'll do it all over again.
hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you, Jay. So, Jay, what's next for you? Looking ahead with what's coming up in the year 2025 and 2026,
Okay.
or even beyond, like what cool projects or initiatives are you able to share that you're excited about?
Okay. Well, the
Or
conference.
even the work you're doing now, now in the future.
Okay. So what I have okay, so the accessibility thing is going pretty well right now, right? I just
Yeah.
had a really nice article come out in Sound and Song magazine. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so and Sound and Song magazine is one of the biggest magazines in the world, right? I remember I've been reading that magazine for like the last 10 years, maybe even more.
Hmm.
And I used to joke around in Trinidad and say, imagine if I'm in Sound and Song magazine one day, right? Now that has happened,
Yeah.
so which kind of puts me in a nice position in terms of accessibility. I can really, advocate for accessibility. I have a voice. Just the fact that you invited me here. You're in Canada. I'm in the UK. I'm from a little island in Trinidad. I'm
Yeah.
talking to you in Canada from my studio here in the UK, right?
Yeah.
It just means that the word is getting out there, what I do and everything, right? So
Yeah.
the next thing, I want to shift the focus a little bit into my
Mm-hmm.
music production, right? As a
Yeah.
music producer. It's kind of slipped a little bit because I've been doing so much like software work and, engineering type work and stuff. So I want to bring it back to the music side a bit, right? I have a
Mm-hmm.
new artist, Alice Eid, that I'm producing from Sheffield here. Brilliant, brilliant artist, So, my hope and prayer is that, she takes off. I think she's ready for international, I think she's just
Wow.
ready to fly, it's just finding the right people at the right
Yeah.
time, which I pray is now, right? The album is just
Mm-hmm.
about to be completed, within the next couple of weeks. So I'm thinking if that flies, it's gonna take although it's my music or music production, and this is me not in an accessibility role, I think it's
Mm-hmm.
going to push accessibility forward, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
mean it's been so long since Stevie Wonder and Andrea Bocelli and
Yeah.
everything. And as amazing that is, it's time for something new, right? So
Mm-hmm.
again, it's an opportunity for people to say, okay, it's not just talk shops and conferences and everything, right? This
Mm-hmm.
this is a producer who has just produced an international artist, totally blind in a fully accessible studio. I think it's going to be the next chapter for accessibility as well. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so let people see it in action. Yes, we've heard about it. We've listened to podcasts, we've attended
Yeah.
conferences about it. Let me turn on the radio and hear a top 40 song produced by a visually impaired producer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think, if this album takes off, it's going to take accessibility up a notch, and it's going to be a win-win situation for everybody. So everybody, you could look out for this album. It's called Minor Hypnosis, and it should be out soon. I'll keep you all posted, Giff,
Please
and
do. Please
spread the
do.
word. So that's it. And then I'm doing that. And then again, a lot more conferences. I'm just about to do a conference called Innovation in Music in Bath in England, here in the UK. And it's a pretty high profile
Yeah.
uh, high profile conference. They've asked me to be a keynote speaker at
Yeah.
it. And
Wow.
that's in about 3 weeks' time. Right,
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing that. I'm also working with the Sheffield Music Hub here, where they assist a lot of young aspiring musicians, secondary school age, and I'm just working with them, doing some production for them and,
Mm-hmm.
trying to, inspire some young people, you know,
Yeah.
to do some music and everything. And yeah,
That's
and
awesome.
whatever, if you ask me next week, maybe something might be added to the calendar. I was talking to my brother yesterday, and he was saying, weekly you have something different to tell me. Something is new, comes up new, you know,
Yeah.
every week. But yeah, those are the kind of things, But I want to kind of bring the focus back to my music production a
Mm-hmm.
lot. I have a fantastic studio here that's doing a lot of software testing now. So I
Yeah.
want to, it needs to be doing more music
Wow.
actually, and that's what I'm kind of aiming for over the next year.
Hmm. That's really exciting, Jay. That's really exciting. Jay, I feel like I could be with you forever talking and, being inspired by your work and like with how like your brain works. It's
Okay.
really, really cool. It's really, really cool. But just wanted to say thank you, for sharing your journey.
Yes, it's
Your
always
work.
inspired. It's always inspiring, Gift. And we've done some work in the past, and it's been fantastic. It's so great to
Yeah,
reconnect again. I
absolutely.
sorry I missed you. When I was in Toronto. Last
Yeah.
last year and in London. Well, London, Ontario. But I
Yeah.
had a really nice experience. I met your co-producer Ken. Who was really
Oh,
kind to
nice.
me and really got me a nice song for one of the events. He was there, and so
Oh,
big up to Ken. I know he's here
yes.
and he's going to
No.
step back in when we finish here to me. Ken's
Yeah.
here keeping everything together for us, and but
Absolutely.
I hope to come back again to Canada. And I must say, big up to Canada, to the people of Canada who were so warm and welcoming to Sarah and myself.
Uh,
It's one of the nicest experiences of my life, actually. That week I was able to spend, in Toronto, Adam Bell,
yeah, yeah. No,
Antia
Adam
Gonzalez.
had told me that you were coming to town, but I was out of the country during that time you were here. So I was really sad to have missed
That's
being
okay. It just means I need to come back, right?
exactly. You do. You absolutely do.
but everybody has been Jay Hodgson, just so many people, Richard Massalis,
Yeah,
Antia Gonzalez, everybody who hosted Sarah and myself, and
yeah,
all the amazing students that we met, at the different
yeah.
events. But what a week it was! It was so inspiring for us, and
Oh,
you know, your people, Canada, was so welcoming to us, and it's a trip that we'll never forget.
oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jay. Your work is not only reshaping the way music is made, but it's also it's reshaping who gets to make the music. So thank you for your time. Everyone, thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope it inspired you to think differently about accessibility, about the inclusion, about music in general as a tool for change for systemic change. Please follow Jay's work and stay tuned for more episodes to come for Rhythms of Access. We're going to put all of Jay's social media links and websites in the description below. So be sure to follow and to keep up to date with what Jay is up to. And we look forward to connecting with you all in the next episode where we continue to spotlight the creators who are transforming our creative world one sound at a time. Thank you, everyone, and we will catch you in the next episode. Bye bye.